I'm the HOA president. This door opens now, or else.
She yells, spotting me through the window. 7 a.m. Delilah Thornwick storms up my driveway, blonde bob tight, clipboard swinging, blazer crisp. She shoves her master key into my deadbolt. Twist hard, yank, grunt, nothing. I'm standing in my kitchen, coffee in hand, watching this entitled woman try to break into my house.
Goddamn piece of shit! Who changed this?
She snarls, then glares straight at me through the glass.
You! Open this door right now!
I take a sip of coffee and shake my head. She pulls out her phone, dials 911 in pure rage. Emergency. Residents barricaded illegally, denying my inspection. Police here now. She screams my address into the phone. My dispatch radio crackles with the same address. I set down my coffee and smile. Little did Karen know. The calm voice about to take her call was watching her meltdown through the window. You ever had an HOA prez try breaking in while staring you down? Drop a quote. Let me back up and tell you how I ended up in this mess. I'm Jake Morrison, 34, and 3 months ago my life was completely different. Married, downtown apartment, full-time EMT for Metro General. Then divorce papers and Uncle Frank's death hit the same brutal week. Frank wasn't just my uncle. He was the guy who taught me how to read people in crisis situations, stay calm under pressure, and never back down from bullies. When he left me his Copper Ridge house, I thought it was salvation. A quiet neighborhood where an EMT could actually sleep between emergency calls. The smell of cedarwood polish still lingered everywhere, mixed with his old pipe tobacco. Frank had been the beloved neighborhood handyman for 30 years, the guy everyone called when life broke down. Everyone except Delilah Thornwick. Delilah moved here in 2015 with surgical precision. Buy house, run for HOA board, seize control. She's 52, drives a silver Lexus with HOAPREZ vanity plates, and marinates in enough lavender perfume to trigger asthma attacks from across the street. The woman treats HOA bylaws like biblical law, except she rewrites them whenever convenient. She showed up exactly 1 week after Frank's funeral. I was unpacking medical textbooks when her heels clicked up my walkway like a countdown timer. Clipboard, laser measuring tool, and a smile that could freeze hellfire. Mr. Morrison, I'm your HOA president. Your uncle accumulated several violations before his unfortunate passing. She measured my fence with scientific precision. 6.2 feet. Regulation maximum is 6 feet even. I produced Frank's framed 2019 approval letter. Uncle Frank got this pre-approved. Her smile went sub-zero. Old management, old rules. New leadership means elevated standards. $2,500 fine. $2,500 for 2 inches Frank had legally built 4 years ago. Here's where it gets interesting and infuriating. The next morning, mailbox citation, $500. My crime? Non-conforming color. It's been basic black since 1987. But I noticed something. My elderly Korean neighbor Mr. Troy got the same citation. Maria Santos, the single Latina mom down the street, got hit for her unauthorized childcare business, babysitting neighborhood kids for free. Meanwhile, the Hendersons' bright purple mailbox, untouched. The Johnsons' fence, clearly 6'4", no citation. What's the difference? The Hendersons and Johnsons are white, married, and drive BMWs. The pattern was uglier than I thought. Day 3 brought my unauthorized vehicle citation. $1,000 for parking my clearly marked EMT response van in my own driveway. When I called to dispute it, Delilah's assistant, her 19-year-old nephew Tommy, whispered, "She says emergency responders lower the neighborhood aesthetic." But the citation that broke me? Uncle Frank's memorial wind chimes, cited for excessive noise pollution, $750. These delicate brass tubes barely whispered in strong wind. Frank crafted them in his workshop, and their gentle sound was the only thing helping me sleep through my grief. Standing in pouring rain, reading that citation, the metallic taste of water mixed with pure rage on my tongue. The paper dissolved in my shaking hands. That's when neighbor Ethel Troy, Mr. Troy's 78-year-old mother-in-law, knocked on my door with coffee and devastating intel. "She's got master keys to half these houses, sweetie," claims emergency inspection rights from some buried bylaw. She's been in my house 3 times this year, rearranged my medications, left citations on my kitchen counter. The woman photographed my late husband's war medals and called them unauthorized wall displays. I pulled up our HOA bylaws that night. Page 47. Board may inspect properties with 24-hour written notice. Written notice, not surprise visits with skeleton keys. But here's what really got my EMT instincts screaming. Ethel whispered that Delilah specifically targets elderly residents, single parents, minorities, and veterans. People who might not know their rights or can't afford lawyers to fight back. I wasn't dealing with an overzealous HOA president. I was dealing with a predator. 2 weeks later, Delilah made her first major mistake. She got greedy. I was dragging myself home from a nightmare shift. 3 cardiac arrests, 2 car crashes, and 1 kitchen fire that turned an entire apartment building into a smoke-filled maze. My EMT uniform reeked like a toxic cocktail of antiseptic and charred grease. The acrid smell clung to my hair, my skin, even my damn socks. All I wanted was a shower, leftover pizza, and 8 hours of blissful unconsciousness. Instead, I found Delilah hosting her own little crime scene investigation in my backyard. She'd brought backup this time, 2 guys in matching HOA inspector polo shirts who looked like they'd flunked out of community college security guard training. They were photographing Frank's workshop like it was evidence in a murder trial, complete with measuring tapes and clipboards. "What the hell are you doing on my property?" Delilah barely glanced up, her pen scratching notes with the urgency of someone writing the great American novel. "Emergency inspection. Mrs. Rodriguez reported your uncle's workshop as a potential fire hazard." Mrs. Rodriguez, the sweet elderly lady who'd been visiting her grandchildren in Florida for 3 weeks. I knew because I'd been collecting her mail and watering her plants. "You mean the Mrs. Rodriguez whose house has been empty since last Tuesday? That Mrs. Rodriguez?" The community college dropouts exchanged the kind of nervous look you see right before someone fails a field sobriety test. But Delilah? Ice cold. "Anonymous complaints don't require identification verification, Mr. Morrison. We're simply documenting potential code violations for community safety." One of her goons was measuring the distance between Frank's workshop and my property line with a laser device that beeped every few seconds like a smoke detector with a dying battery. The sound was driving me nuts, but he seemed genuinely baffled by the technology in his hands. You know what I learned during my EMT training? When someone starts throwing around official-sounding phrases like code violations and community safety, they're usually covering up the fact that they have no idea what they're talking about. This structure appears to encroach on the mandatory 15-foot setback requirement, Delilah announced, scribbling furiously. "That constitutes a major structural violation." I pulled out my phone and accessed the county property records, a trick Frank taught me when he was fighting a neighbor's fence dispute years ago. This workshop was built in 1987 with full permits. Required setback was 10 feet then, and measurements show it's clearly 12 feet from the property line. Current standards supersede historical permits. There it was again, Delilah's magic phrase for rewriting reality whenever it suited her agenda. The next morning, my mailbox looked like Christmas morning, if Santa was a vindictive bureaucrat with a calculator and serious authority issues. 7 violation notices, $12,000 in fines. The list read like a satirical take on suburban paranoia. Unauthorized structure for Frank's workshop, $4,000. Landscape non-compliance, because his wildflower patch attracted bees. Apparently nature is a HOA violation, $2,500. Paint color deviation. My house was sage green instead of the approved forest green, which looked identical to my untrained eye, $1,500. My personal favorite? Pet waste violation for $1,000. I don't own pets, unless you count the occasional squirrel that raids my bird feeder. That's when something clicked in my emergency responder brain. In my line of work, documentation isn't just paperwork, it's survival. Every cardiac arrest, every accident scene, every split-second decision gets recorded because someone, somewhere, will question your judgment. Your career, sometimes someone's life, depends on having proof. So, I decided to treat Delilah like a medical emergency that needed careful documentation. I installed basic wireless security cameras around my property. Nothing fancy, just consumer-grade units that any homeowner could set up in an afternoon. Then I started what I called my incident report, tracking every HOA violation in the neighborhood, noting patterns, recording dates and times of Delilah's patrol routes. The pattern that emerged was more systematic than I'd imagined. Young families with kids and nice cars, occasional minor violations, usually dismissed after review. Everyone else? Welcome to HOA hell. Mrs. Troy got slammed with $8,000 for inappropriate holiday decorations, her Korean New Year lanterns. Maria Santos, working 2 jobs to support her kids, faced $6,500 for unauthorized childcare operation because she watched neighbors' kids after school. Vietnam veteran Bill Kowalski owed $4,000 for improper flag display. His POW/MIA flag hung exactly where military protocol required it. But here's the mini twist that changed everything. I wasn't the first person to figure out Delilah's game. Ethel Troy knocked on my door one evening with jasmine tea and a shoebox that would blow this whole thing wide open. "Your Uncle Frank was gathering evidence before he died," she whispered, handing me 2 years' worth of documentation. Financial records, photos of illegal entries, recordings of board meetings. He knew she was corrupt. He just ran out of time to prove it. That shoebox contained everything. HOA funds flowing into Delilah's consulting company, photos of her using master keys at 2 a.m., audio recordings of her bragging about maintaining neighborhood standards. Frank hadn't just been the neighborhood handyman. He'd been building a case that would destroy Delilah Thornwick, and now it was mine to finish. Delilah's next move proved she was either incredibly confident or dangerously stupid. Honestly, I'm leaning toward both. 2 days after discovering Frank's evidence shoebox, my mailbox delivered what I like to call legal terrorism in envelope form. The certified letter was thick enough to stop a bullet and arrived with the kind of official weight that makes your stomach drop before you even open it. Intent to place lien, final notice. The smell of cheap legal paper and toner ink filled my kitchen as I read Delilah's masterpiece of bureaucratic intimidation. She claimed I owed $18,500 in unpaid fines. Apparently my violations had been breeding like rabbits while I wasn't looking. Late fees, administrative costs, and something called compliance acceleration penalties had magically appeared like mushrooms after rain. But here's where Delilah showed her true colors. She'd CC'd this letter to my mortgage company, Metro General's HR department, and 3 credit agencies. The woman wasn't just trying to collect money. She was attempting financial assassination with surgical precision. Unfortunately for her, intimidation tactics don't work on someone who's performed CPR on strangers while their car burned around them. I've seen real emergencies. This was just paperwork with attitude. Her psychological warfare campaign escalated faster than a code blue alert. She began parking across from my house during my shifts, sitting in that silver Lexus like a suburban spy, engine running and air conditioning blasting enough Freon to punch a hole in the ozone. The click, click, click of her camera lens sounded like an angry insect every time a delivery truck or visitor approached my property. Then she made her biggest tactical error. She called my boss. Captain Rodriguez pulled me aside after morning briefing, his weathered face showing the kind of concern usually reserved for intervention meetings and disciplinary hearings. The man had seen 30 years of emergency services drama, so his worried expression made my coffee taste like liquid anxiety. "Jake, someone called about you. HOA president from your neighborhood. Claims you're showing erratic behavior, possible substance abuse. I know it's bullshit, but I have to ask. You doing okay?" The industrial-strength coffee burned my throat as I explained Delilah's harassment campaign. Rodriguez listened with the patience of someone who dealt with every flavor of human crazy during 3 decades of keeping people alive. "Sounds like you've got a psycho neighbor," he concluded. "But watch yourself. People like that don't quit until they get what they want, or someone stops them permanently." 3 days later, Delilah filed a police report that would have made fiction writers proud. According to her sworn statement, I'd aggressively confronted her during one of her surveillance sessions, approached her vehicle in a threatening manner, and made intimidating comments about her personal safety. The actual incident? I walked to my mailbox, noticed her photographing my house, and said, "Good morning. with the kind of forced civility you use when you'd rather see someone get trampled by angry geese. But while Delilah was busy playing suburban stalker, I was channeling my EMT training into something she'd never expect: methodical problem solving. Here's what they teach you in emergency medicine. When everything's chaos, you document first. Then you find the right specialist for the job. So I took Frank's evidence to Lisa Park, the estate attorney who'd helped him plan his will, and apparently spent decades watching HOA tyrants destroy good people's lives. Lisa had the kind of sharp eyes that could spot a liar from 3 counties away, and a smile that suggested she enjoyed watching bullies get their comeuppance. She examined Frank's evidence like a forensic investigator, occasionally making notes that looked like battle plans written in legal hieroglyphics. "Your HOA president made a classic criminal mistake," she said, spreading out several lean documents across her conference table. "She got cocky and lazy." She pointed to signature lines on 3 different threats. 5 board members supposedly signed these documents. Notice anything? The signatures were identical, not similar, identical. Like someone had used tracing paper or just gotten sloppy with the forgeries. "That's fraud, Jake. And since Delilah personally signed legal documents without proper board authorization, she's committed unauthorized practice of law. In some states, that's a felony." But here's the mini twist that made my entire week. Lisa had been building a case against Delilah for over a year. "You're victim number 13, she revealed, producing a folder thick enough to choke a horse. "I represent 12 other homeowners facing identical lien threats. Same pattern every time. Target vulnerable residents, pile on bogus violations, threaten foreclosure, then offer payment plans that keep people trapped in debt cycles." She showed me her client list, and my blood pressure spiked like a cardiac monitor during a heart attack. Mrs. Troy, Maria Santos, Bill Kowalski. Every elderly resident, single parent, minority, and veteran in our neighborhood who'd been systematically targeted. "But here's the beautiful part," Lisa continued, her smile turning predatory. "I ran financial background checks on our dear HOA president. The results were delicious. Delilah was drowning in personal debt, $47,000 in credit cards, underwater mortgage, maxed home equity loans. But her Management Consulting, LLC, had extracted $156,000 from HOA accounts over 3 years. Current HOA balance? Lisa asked rhetorically. $12,000. Should be over $200,000. That's when I realized Delilah wasn't just a power-drunk neighborhood bully. She was running a sophisticated embezzlement operation, using fraudulent violations to justify stealing from everyone she was supposed to protect. And she'd just picked the wrong target to mess with. Delilah's desperation peaked when she realized her usual intimidation tactics weren't working. Cornered predators, I've learned from years of emergency calls, become exponentially more dangerous. Her nuclear option arrived on a Wednesday morning that started with the acrid smell of burning electronics drifting from my garage. My EMT response van wouldn't start, engine cranking but refusing to catch. 20 minutes later, I discovered why. Someone had poured sugar into my gas tank overnight. Sugar doesn't actually destroy engines, that's an urban myth, but it does create a sticky mess that requires expensive professional cleaning. More importantly, it meant I couldn't respond to emergency calls, which could cost lives, and definitely would cost me my job. But Delilah wasn't finished with her sabotage campaign. That afternoon, she filed a police report claiming I'd threatened her with medical equipment during our last encounter. According to her vivid imagination, I'd brandished a stethoscope in a menacing manner and made medically threatening statements about her cardiac health. The reality? I'd been wearing my stethoscope around my neck after a shift, and when she'd screamed at me about property violations, I'd calmly suggested she might want to check her blood pressure because stress could be dangerous at her age. Apparently, medical advice from a licensed EMT now qualified as assault with a deadly instrument. Her next move targeted my wallet directly. She attempted to bribe County Building Inspector Dave Kowalski, no relation to veteran Bill, offering him $2,000 cash to condemn my house as structurally unsafe due to Frank's workshop allegedly compromising the foundation. Dave, a straight-arrow inspector with 30 years of experience, called me directly. "Jake, some lady tried to slip me cash to red tag your property. House is solid as a rock. Your uncle built everything to code and then some, but you should know someone's playing dirty pool. The taste of rage was metallic on my tongue, as I thanked Dave for his honesty. Delilah wasn't just harassing me anymore. She was trying to corrupt public officials to destroy my home. But her cruelest attack came when she discovered the one thing that could genuinely hurt me. She called my ex-wife Jennifer. "Mrs. Morrison, this is Delilah Thornwick, Jake's HOA president. I'm calling out of concern for his mental health and potential substance abuse issues. As someone who knew him intimately, I thought you should be aware of his erratic behavior and associations with questionable individuals." Jennifer, God bless her, saw right through the manipulation. She called me immediately, her voice tight with the kind of protective anger that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with her in the first place. "Some psycho neighbor of yours tried to get dirt on you for character assassination," she reported. "Wanted to know about your drinking, your temper, whether you'd ever been violent. I told her you're the most patient man I know and that she could go find a cactus to sit on." That's when I knew Delilah had crossed from harassment into desperation. While she was busy trying to destroy my reputation, I was quietly building an unassailable case with Lisa Park's help. My EMT training had taught me that successful treatment requires understanding the full scope of the problem. So we'd been conducting what I called diagnostic investigation into Delilah's entire operation. The results were more damning than we'd imagined. Maria Santos had provided security footage of Delilah using master keys to enter her house at 2 a.m., rearranging furniture and leaving citations tucked inside family photos. Mrs. Troy had recorded phone conversations where Delilah bragged about keeping undesirable elements in line through strategic pressure. Bill Kowalski had documented every illegal entry, every forged signature, every discriminatory fine. But the smoking gun came from an unexpected source. Tommy Briggs, Delilah's 19-year-old nephew. Tommy knocked on my door one evening, nervous as a cardiac patient awaiting test results. The kid needed community service hours for college, and Delilah had recruited him as her administrative assistant for HOA inspections. "Mr. Morrison, I can't keep doing this," he whispered, glancing around like he expected his aunt to materialize from the shadows. "She's got me documenting stuff that isn't even violations, forging board meeting minutes, creating fake complaints from residents who don't exist." He handed me a thumb drive containing months of evidence. Audio recordings of Delilah planning false flag operations against residents she wanted gone. Financial spreadsheets showing money flowing from HOA accounts to her personal businesses. Even text messages coordinating with her fake inspectors to target specific demographics. She specifically goes after old people, minorities, single parents, and veterans, Tommy confirmed. Says they're less likely to fight back or know their legal rights. The mini twist that sealed Delilah's fate? Tommy revealed she was already planning her exit strategy. She's been transferring HOA money to offshore accounts through her consulting company, talking about moving to Costa Rica by the end of the year, before anyone figures out how much she's stolen. But what Tommy didn't know, and what would make Delilah's downfall even sweeter, was that we weren't the only ones building a case against her. The State Attorney General's HOA Fraud Task Force had been monitoring her activities for months, waiting for enough evidence to guarantee conviction. They were about to get more than they'd bargained for. Everything changed the night Ethel Troy brought me Uncle Frank's final secret. I was sitting in my living room, surrounded by evidence boxes and legal documents, when she knocked on my door, carrying a manila envelope sealed with the kind of tape that means, "Open this, and your life changes forever." "Frank made me promise to give this to whoever inherited his house," she said, her weathered hands shaking slightly. "But only if Delilah tried to hurt them too." Inside the envelope was a USB drive labeled "Insurance Policy" in Frank's careful handwriting, along with a letter that made my blood run cold. "If you're reading this, it means Delilah Thornwick has targeted you like she targeted me. What you don't know is that I wasn't just the neighborhood handyman. I was the HOA's treasurer from 2016 until my death. And I discovered something that will destroy her completely." Frank hadn't just been documenting Delilah's corruption. He'd been the inside man with access to every financial record, every forged document, every illegal transaction she'd made over 8 years of systematic theft. The USB drive contained the complete financial autopsy of Delilah's embezzlement operation. HOA dues and fines totaling $847,000, collected since 2016. Current account balance, $12,847. The difference, $834,153, had vanished into a web of shell companies, fake consulting contracts, and offshore accounts that Frank had traced with the methodical precision of a forensic accountant. But the financial theft was just the beginning. Frank had discovered that Delilah never properly reincorporated the HOA after the 2016 board restructure. She'd filed the wrong forms with the state, used an invalid registered agent, and failed to maintain the nonprofit status required for legal authority. Technically, every fine, lien, and legal action taken since 2016 was fraudulent because the HOA itself didn't legally exist. She's been operating a fake organization for 8 years, Frank wrote, collecting money under false pretenses, wielding authority she doesn't possess, and terrorizing residents with completely invalid legal threats. The smoking gun was a recording Frank had made of Delilah's confession during what she thought was a private board meeting. Her voice was crystal clear as she admitted to deliberately targeting minorities, elderly residents, and veterans because they don't know their rights and can't afford lawyers to challenge us. But Frank's investigation revealed an even more sinister pattern. Delilah hadn't stumbled into HOA corruption. She'd engineered it from the beginning. She'd moved to Copper Ridge specifically to run for the board, after researching neighborhoods with vulnerable populations and weak oversight. This was her 4th HOA presidency in different states, always following the same pattern: gain control, loot the treasury, target undesirable residents, then disappear before anyone could stop her. Her real name wasn't even Delilah Thornwick. She was Delilah Worthington, wanted in Arizona for identical HOA fraud, totaling $2.3 million across 3 different communities. She'd changed her name and moved to our state one step ahead of criminal charges, planning to repeat her scam until someone finally caught her. Frank's final revelation was the most damaging. He'd already contacted the state attorney general's office before his heart attack. They'd been building a criminal case for months, waiting for Frank to provide testimony and documentation. His death had stalled their investigation, until now. The AG's office has a standing reward for information leading to conviction in HOA fraud cases, Frank wrote. More importantly, they have the authority to freeze assets, reverse fraudulent transactions, and recover stolen funds for victims. I stared at the letter, understanding finally why Delilah had escalated her attack so dramatically. She hadn't been targeting me because of violations or personality conflicts. She'd been trying to drive me out before I discovered what Frank knew: that she was a career criminal who'd been systematically destroying our neighborhood for 8 years while stealing everything we'd paid to protect it. But Frank's insurance policy was about to pay dividends she'd never see coming. The hunter was about to become the hunted. Frank's evidence changed everything. What had started as a neighborhood dispute was now a federal case waiting to happen, and I was about to become the prosecution's star witness. The next morning, I assembled what I started calling Operation Copper Ridge Justice, a coordinated response that would hit Delilah from every possible angle simultaneously. My EMT training had taught me that complex emergencies require systematic triage, address the most critical issues first, then work systematically through secondary problems. Lisa Park became my legal quarterback, coordinating a multi-pronged attack that would make D-Day look like a neighborhood barbecue. "We're going to file criminal complaints with 4 different agencies on the same day," she explained, spreading documents across her conference table like battle plans. State Attorney General for HOA fraud, County Prosecutor for embezzlement and forgery, FBI for mail fraud, those fake liens crossed state lines, and IRS for tax evasion on her unreported consulting income. The beauty of this approach was simple. Delilah couldn't run from or manipulate multiple jurisdictions simultaneously. While she was hiring lawyers to fight one case, 3 others would be building steam behind her back. But legal warfare was only part of our strategy. I coordinated with Sarah Kim, the investigative reporter from County Chronicle, who'd been sniffing around HOA corruption stories for months. Sarah had the kind of aggressive journalism instincts that could turn local scandals into statewide news, exactly what we needed to prevent Delilah from quietly fleeing to Costa Rica. "This story has everything," Sarah said, reviewing Frank's evidence with the enthusiasm of a prospector striking gold. Financial fraud, discriminatory targeting, elderly abuse, veteran harassment. If we time this right, it'll be front-page news the same day criminal charges are filed. The technical elements required careful coordination. I used my EMT incident command training to create a neighborhood communication network. Every affected resident got assigned specific documentation tasks based on their skills and evidence access. Maria Santos, who worked in accounting, analyzed the financial discrepancies in HOA budgets. Bill Kowalski used his military experience to organize surveillance schedules tracking Delilah's activities. Mrs. Troy coordinated with other elderly residents to document illegal entries and discriminatory enforcement. For anyone dealing with similar corruption, here's what we learned about effective evidence gathering. Treat it like building a medical case file. Document everything chronologically. Photograph all physical evidence. Record dates and times precisely, and always have witnesses when possible. The pattern of abuse matters more than individual incidents because it proves intent rather than mistakes. The physical trap required more creativity. We decided to create irresistible bait, violations so obvious that Delilah couldn't resist targeting them, while ensuring every second of her illegal response was recorded in high-definition video and audio. I installed motion-activated security cameras with night vision capabilities around my property, hidden in weatherproof housings that looked like electrical junction boxes. The system connected to my smartphone and automatically uploaded footage to cloud storage that even Delilah's lawyers couldn't touch. But the psychological component was equally important. Tommy Briggs, Delilah's nephew, had agreed to become our inside source in exchange for immunity from prosecution and a full college scholarship funded by recovered HOA money. The kid was genuinely remorseful about his involvement and scared of his aunt's increasingly erratic behavior. She's been talking about final solutions for problem residents, Tommy reported during one of our clandestine meetings at a Starbucks 3 towns over. And she's paranoid about being watched, checking for cameras everywhere she goes. Perfect. Paranoid people make mistakes, and we were counting on Delilah's desperation to override her caution. The media strategy required precise timing. Sarah Kim coordinated with TV news partners in 3 neighboring counties, planning simultaneous story releases the moment criminal charges were filed. Social media campaigns were prepared to amplify the story reach, complete with hashtags like #HOA corruption and #Copper Ridge Justice. We also established legal protection for vulnerable neighbors. Lisa Park arranged pro bono representation for every resident facing fraudulent liens, ensuring Delilah couldn't retaliate against our witnesses through the court system. Emergency protective orders were prepared for elderly residents who might face escalated harassment as Delilah realized her situation was deteriorating. The financial investigation revealed opportunities for asset recovery. Frank's documentation showed exactly where stolen HOA funds had gone, making it possible to freeze accounts and recover money before Delilah could transfer everything offshore. The state attorney general's office confirmed they could seize assets immediately upon filing charges, preventing her planned escape to Costa Rica. But the most satisfying element of our plan was the public confrontation. We arranged for the monthly HOA meeting to become Delilah's public downfall. State oversight officials would attend to formally dissolve the fraudulent organization. Media would be present to document her reaction. Law enforcement would be standing by with arrest warrants. Most importantly, every neighbor she terrorized would be there to watch justice finally arrive in Copper Ridge. The trap was set. Evidence was documented. Legal machinery was in motion. All we needed was for Delilah to make one final mistake. And based on her escalating desperation, that wouldn't take long. Frank's insurance policy was about to pay the ultimate dividend, the complete destruction of a predator who'd spent 8 years terrorizing innocent people. The countdown had begun. Desperation makes people stupid, and Delilah was about to prove that rule with spectacular precision. Her first major tactical error came when she realized neighbors had stopped paying her fraudulent fines. Instead of backing down like a rational criminal, she doubled down like a gambling addict, convinced the next hand would save her. The smell of fresh concrete dust filled my nostrils as I discovered her latest sabotage attempt. She'd hired a crew to pour quick-set cement into the storm drains around my property, claiming unauthorized water runoff required emergency remediation. The result was a flooding nightmare that turned my front yard into a miniature lake every time it rained. But her escalation didn't stop at property damage. She filed false police reports claiming I'd threatened her with emergency medical procedures during our confrontations. According to her creative fiction, I'd offered to check her pulse permanently and suggested she might need cardiac intervention if she didn't stop harassing neighbors. The reality? I'd mentioned that stress could cause serious health problems and offered to check her blood pressure because she seemed dangerously agitated. Apparently, offering free medical advice now qualified as assault with intent to commit involuntary surgery. Her smear campaign expanded to social media with the creativity of a conspiracy theorist and the subtlety of a sledgehammer. She created multiple fake Facebook profiles to spread rumors about my drug abuse and violent tendencies. Posts claimed I'd been dishonorably discharged from emergency services for patient abuse and was currently under investigation for theft of medical supplies. Every word was defamatory fiction, but the posts spread through neighborhood social media like a virus designed by someone who'd studied psychological warfare. The most vicious attack targeted my family. She somehow obtained my mother's death certificate and filed a complaint with the cemetery HOA. Yes, even graveyards have homeowner associations, claiming Mom's memorial headstone violated aesthetic guidelines and needed immediate removal. My mother had died of cancer 3 years ago. Her headstone was a simple granite marker with her name, dates, and beloved mother engraved below a small cross. But according to Delilah's complaint, religious symbols were non-conforming decorative elements that created visual discord in the memorial garden. The taste of pure rage was like copper pennies dissolving on my tongue as I read that complaint. Delilah had crossed from harassment into desecration, and she'd just made the biggest mistake of her criminal career. While she was busy trying to destroy everything I cared about, our evidence-gathering operation was documenting her descent into complete desperation. Tommy Briggs provided audio recordings of Delilah planning what she called false flag operations against supporters of my resistance movement. She'd instructed him to plant evidence of code violations in neighbors' yards, then photograph them as proof of non-compliance. Maria Santos's security cameras captured Delilah vandalizing multiple properties at night, slashing garden hoses, dumping trash in flower beds, spray painting graffiti on fences she planned to cite for gang activity the next morning. But the most damaging evidence came from Delilah's own mouth. She'd started recording voice memos on her phone, apparently to document her heroic efforts to maintain community standards against criminal elements. What she actually recorded was a confession to 8 years of systematic fraud, discrimination, and theft. These people don't understand that property values require eliminating undesirable elements, she rambled in one recording. Minorities lower neighborhood appeal, elderly residents create maintenance issues, veterans bring violence and PTSD problems. My job is protecting real homeowners from these parasites. The recordings were pure poison, exactly what prosecutors needed to prove intentional discrimination and criminal conspiracy. But Delilah's final desperate gambit revealed just how far she'd sink to protect her criminal empire. She hired Marcus Webb, an attorney with a reputation for intimidating whistleblowers and bankrupting honest people with frivolous litigation. Webb specialized in what he called legal terrorism, drowning opponents in expensive court procedures until they surrendered from financial exhaustion. Within days, Webb filed lawsuits against every neighbor supporting my harassment campaign. Maria Santos faced charges of conspiracy to defame. Mrs. Troy was accused of elder abuse for encouraging other elderly residents to document violations. Bill Kowalski was sued for veteran impersonation because Webb claimed his Purple Heart was fake. The mini-twist that destroyed Webb's strategy. Lisa Park had been expecting exactly this response. Amateur move, she told me with the satisfaction of a chess master watching an opponent walk into checkmate. Webb's reputation for intimidation just became evidence of criminal conspiracy to obstruct justice. Every frivolous lawsuit Webb filed on Delilah's behalf became additional evidence of her desperate attempts to silence witnesses and obstruct legitimate law enforcement investigations. Better yet, Webb's aggressive tactics triggered automatic sanctions under state anti-SLAPP laws, designed to protect people from exactly this kind of legal abuse. Instead of scaring our witnesses into silence, Delilah had just handed prosecutors evidence that her criminal conspiracy included attempts to pervert the legal system itself. The trap was closing, and Delilah was about to discover that cornering honest people only makes them more determined to see justice done. Her reign of terror was nearly over. Delilah's final gambit proved that even cornered predators can surprise you with their capacity for self-destruction. Her last-ditch legal strategy involved hiring Marcus Webb, an attorney whose business model resembled extortion with law school credentials. Webb's reputation for destroying honest people through frivolous litigation made him the perfect weapon for someone desperate enough to burn everything down rather than face consequences. Webb's opening salvo arrived like legal napalm. Cease and desist letters, demanding all evidence against Delilah be destroyed immediately. The letters claimed our documentation violated privacy laws, constituted criminal harassment, and represented tortious interference with legitimate business operations. He threatened to file bar complaints against Lisa Park for unethical client solicitation and conspiracy to defame a public official. According to Webb's creative interpretation of legal ethics, helping fraud victims constituted professional misconduct worthy of disbarment. Sarah Kim received her own letter threatening her newspaper with defamation lawsuits if they published unsubstantiated allegations against a respected community leader. Webb claimed investigative journalism violated Delilah's civil rights and promised to sue for damages that would bankrupt the County Chronicle. But Webb's most vicious attack targeted my livelihood directly. He filed a motion demanding I be removed from EMT duties immediately, claiming mental instability and obsessive behavior made me dangerous to patients. His petition included fabricated witness statements alleging I'd threatened to use medical knowledge to harm enemies and had been stockpiling emergency medications for unknown purposes. The taste of institutional coffee turned to ash in my mouth as Captain Rodriguez called me into his office again. This time, his weathered face showed the strain of someone caught between protecting his people and protecting his department. Jake, I know this is bullshit, but the department can't ignore formal complaints about employee mental health. I'm putting you on administrative leave pending investigation. Administrative leave, the career-ending limbo that destroys reputations even when accusations prove false. Delilah had found the one weapon that could genuinely hurt me, attacking my ability to save lives. But while Webb was busy with his legal terrorism campaign, our side was executing the final phase of Operation Copper Ridge Justice. Tommy Briggs provided the smoking gun we'd been waiting for, a recording of Delilah admitting her entire exit strategy. The key is transferring the remaining HOA funds to offshore accounts before anyone realizes how much I've stolen, she'd confided to Webb during what she thought was a privileged attorney-client conversation. I've already moved $600,000 to Costa Rica. The rest goes out Friday, then I'm gone. She planned to flee the country within a week, leaving behind 8 years of financial devastation and traumatized neighbors who'd never see justice or recovery. What Delilah didn't know was that Tommy had been wearing a wire provided by the State Attorney General's office. The FBI had been monitoring her financial transactions for months, waiting for enough evidence to guarantee conviction on federal charges. Her confession to international money laundering triggered immediate action from multiple law enforcement agencies. Friday morning brought the sound of justice in the form of asset freezing orders. Federal marshals seized Delilah's house, her car, her bank accounts, and even her precious HOA license plates. The offshore accounts she thought were safe, frozen solid by international banking cooperation treaties that made her Costa Rica dream evaporate faster than morning dew. But the most satisfying development was Webb's spectacular career implosion. The State Bar Association opened emergency proceedings against him after discovering he'd filed knowingly false statements and participated in witness intimidation. His threats against Sarah Kim violated anti-SLAPP statutes designed to protect journalists from exactly his kind of legal abuse. Within hours, Webb was begging Lisa Park for immunity deals while throwing Delilah under every legal bus he could find. My client was clearly suffering from mental deterioration, he claimed, in a desperate attempt to save his own license. I was manipulated into filing frivolous suits by someone who wasn't competent to make legal decisions. The mini twist that sealed both their fates? Delilah had been recording their conversations too. She documented every instruction she'd given Webb, every strategy they'd planned, every illegal tactic they'd coordinated. Her paranoid need to control everything had created a perfect record of their criminal conspiracy. When federal agents searched her house, they found detailed files on every neighbor she'd targeted, complete with discriminatory comments, financial status assessments, and vulnerability rankings. She'd literally created a target list for terrorizing innocent people. But the most damning evidence was her success journal, a leather-bound notebook where she documented her proudest moments of cruelty. Entries included celebrating when elderly Mrs. Peterson had cried over a $3,000 fine for excessive bird feeding, and gloating when veteran Bill Kowalski's wife had left him after the stress of fraudulent violations triggered his PTSD episodes. The woman had kept trophies of the lives she'd destroyed. As Friday afternoon arrived, emergency vehicles surrounded Copper Ridge subdivision, not ambulances or fire trucks. Federal agents, state investigators, and media crews preparing to document the end of Delilah Thornwick's reign of terror. The public confrontation I'd been planning was about to become a live broadcast demonstration of what happens when ordinary people refuse to let evil triumph. Justice was finally coming to Copper Ridge. The community center had never seen drama like this. What was supposed to be a routine monthly HOA meeting had transformed into the neighborhood equivalent of the Nuremberg trials, complete with federal agents, news cameras, and enough evidence to bury Delilah Thornwick under a mountain of felony charges. I arrived in my freshly pressed EMT uniform. Captain Rodriguez had reinstated me that morning after Webb's legal terrorism backfired spectacularly. The smell of industrial carpet cleaner and nervous sweat filled the packed room, as neighbors who'd been terrorized for years finally gathered to watch their tormentor face justice. Delilah entered confidently with her new attorney, Webb having fled faster than a medical malpractice defendant. She wore her usual power blazer and carried her clipboard like a shield, apparently still believing she could control the narrative through sheer entitlement and bureaucratic intimidation. The room was standing room only. Every neighbor she'd victimized, plus state investigators, federal agents, media crews from 3 counties, and a few prosecutors who'd driven hours just to watch this career-defining arrest happen live on television. State HOA oversight official Margaret Troy, no relation to Mrs. Troy, called the meeting to order with the kind of formal authority that makes criminals' knees shake. We're here to address serious allegations of financial fraud, discriminatory enforcement, and criminal conspiracy involving the Copper Ridge Homeowners Association and its current leadership. Delilah interrupted with her usual entitled aggression. This is harassment orchestrated by Jake Morrison, an unstable individual who's been targeting me for months. I demand. That's when I stood up calmly, still wearing the uniform that represented 8 years of saving lives while she'd been destroying them. Ma'am, I'm Jake Morrison. I believe we need to talk about that 911 call you made when you couldn't break into my house. Her face went blank for exactly 3 seconds, the look of someone realizing they've walked into a trap they can't escape. You're the dispatcher? Part-time dispatcher, full-time EMT, and apparently your worst nightmare. The room erupted in murmurs as neighbors finally understood the cosmic justice of Delilah calling the police on the exact person she'd been trying to destroy. Sarah Kim activated the projector, filling the wall with financial analysis that looked like a medical examiner's report on a murdered treasury. Ladies and gentlemen, 8 years of systematic embezzlement. HOA collected $847,000 in dues and fines. Current balance, $12,847. Maria Santos took the microphone with the confidence of someone who'd finally found her voice. This chart shows exactly where your money went, into shell companies, fake consulting contracts, and offshore accounts controlled by Delilah Thornwick. But the evidence that destroyed Delilah completely was audio from her own mouth. Tommy Briggs activated the speakers, and Delilah's voice filled the room with toxic clarity. These people don't understand that property values require eliminating undesirable elements. Minorities lower neighborhood appeal. Elderly residents create maintenance issues. Veterans bring violence problems. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Bill Kowalski, decorated Vietnam veteran, stood slowly and stared directly at the woman who tried to destroy him for serving his country. "Ma'am, I didn't survive 2 tours in Southeast Asia to be terrorized by a small-time criminal in my own neighborhood." That's when County Prosecutor James Mitchell rose from his seat near the back. "Mrs. Thornwick, you're under arrest for 23 felony counts including embezzlement, fraud, money laundering, and civil rights violations." The handcuffs clicked with the satisfying finality of justice finally arriving. But Delilah wasn't finished humiliating herself. "This is impossible. I'm the HOA president. I have authority here." FBI agent Patricia Reeves stepped forward with documents that would end that delusion permanently. "Actually, ma'am, our investigation reveals the HOA hasn't been legally incorporated since 2016. You've been operating a fraudulent organization for 8 years. The room filled with gasps as neighbors realized every fine, every violation, every threat had been completely illegal from the beginning. Arizona Detective Michael Santos joined the conversation via video conference. "Mrs. Worthington, yes, that's your real name. You're wanted here for identical HOA fraud totaling $2.3 million across 3 communities. Delilah's final moment of defiance crumbled into pathetic desperation. "Wait! I can make deals. I know things about other HOAs. I can pay everything back." But as federal marshals led her past rows of neighbors she'd victimized, the only sound was spontaneous applause from people who'd finally seen evil face consequences. Mrs. Troy stood near the door, tears streaming down her weathered face. "Frank would be so proud," she whispered, as Delilah was escorted past Uncle Frank's memorial photos that neighbors had brought to honor the man who'd started this fight. Outside, news cameras captured the perp walk as Delilah was loaded into a federal vehicle. Her perfectly styled blonde bob was disheveled, her power blazer wrinkled, her clipboard abandoned on the community center floor like the worthless prop it had always been. The sound of car doors slamming shut was the neighborhood's collective sigh of relief. 8 years of terror were finally over. Justice had come to Copper Ridge. 6 months later, Copper Ridge felt like a completely different neighborhood, the kind of place Uncle Frank had always envisioned it could be. Delilah Worthington received 8 years in federal prison and a restitution order for $2.1 million. The judge called her crimes a systematic campaign of terror against vulnerable residents, and noted that her victims included elderly citizens, veterans, and single parents who'd trusted her to protect their community. Her offshore accounts were frozen and liquidated. Every stolen dollar was recovered and distributed back to the residents she'd defrauded. My own bogus fines were not only dismissed, but resulted in a $3,000 settlement for emotional distress and property damage. Marcus Webb was disbarred permanently after the State Bar Association discovered he'd filed fraudulent court documents in 17 different cases. His legal career ended faster than a cardiac arrest patient without immediate intervention. Tommy Briggs received a full scholarship to study criminal justice, funded by recovered HOA money and a grateful community that appreciated his courage in exposing his aunt's crimes. The kid who'd started as Delilah's reluctant accomplice became our neighborhood hero. But the real transformation was in how our community operated. We elected an entirely new HOA board with term limits, mandatory financial audits, and a requirement that all meetings be live-streamed for transparency. New bylaws require multiple board signatures for any fine over $100, and residents can appeal any violation to an independent arbitration panel. HOA dues dropped by 60% after we eliminated Delilah's fake consulting contracts and administrative fees. The money we saved went toward genuine community improvements, playground equipment, street lighting, and a neighborhood watch program that actually protects residents instead of terrorizing them. The Frank Morrison Community Justice Fund became our proudest achievement. Using seed money from recovered HOA funds, we established a legal aid foundation that helps other communities fight HOA corruption. The fund provides free legal assistance, financial counseling, and investigation services to residents facing similar abuse across 3 states. Sarah Kim's reporting on our case led to state HOA reform legislation known as the Copper Ridge Laws, which require financial transparency, protect whistleblowers, and establish criminal penalties for discriminatory enforcement. 5 other states have adopted similar protections based on our experience. I testified before the state legislature about protecting residents from HOA abuse, sharing lessons learned during our 8-month battle against corruption. The most important message was simple. Bullies count on good people staying isolated and scared. But when communities organize and fight back systematically, even the most entrenched criminals can be defeated. Personal healing came gradually, like recovery from major trauma. My relationship with my neighbors deepened beyond simple proximity into genuine friendship forged through shared struggle. Mrs. Troy teaches me traditional Korean cooking while sharing stories about her husband's military service. Maria Santos and I coordinate neighborhood emergency response training. My EMT skills, combined with her organizational abilities, create a safety network that actually serves our community. Bill Kowalski and I work together, maintaining the memorial garden we created in Uncle Frank's honor. The garden features plants from every family in the neighborhood, representing the diversity that Delilah had tried to destroy. His wind chimes still whisper gently in the breeze, but now they're joined by a dozen others, contributed by grateful neighbors. The biggest personal surprise was Sarah Kim. Our partnership in exposing Delilah's crimes evolved into something deeper than professional collaboration. She's brilliant, fearless, and shares my belief that journalism should protect ordinary people from powerful predators. Our first date was reviewing court documents over Chinese takeout. Not exactly romantic, but perfect for 2 people who'd found love while fighting for justice. Our annual Frank Morrison Community Day Festival fills the local park with vendor booths, live music, children's activities, and the kind of neighborhood celebration that happens when people aren't afraid of their own HOA board. This year's festival proceeds funded college scholarships for 3 local kids whose families had been targeted by Delilah's discriminatory enforcement. Education, we've learned, is the best long-term protection against future corruption. The most satisfying vindication came when other communities started reaching out for help with their own HOA nightmares. What began as one neighborhood's fight against a local tyrant has become a statewide movement for accountability and reform. Every week brings calls from residents facing similar abuse, and our Justice Fund now helps coordinate investigations in dozens of communities. We've learned that Delilah wasn't unique. She was part of a pattern of corruption that thrives when good people feel powerless to resist.